Hey guys, so today we're going to talk with Spencer McMullen, an attorney who works here in Guadalajara and Chapala and handles cases all over Mexico. But we're going to be talking about all things immigration and visas. So let's go. All right, well thanks again so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I initially contacted you a couple years ago when I was thinking about moving to Mexico and needing my visas issued, and very big help. I really appreciate it. And since then, you've been a really big help getting me out of a couple jams. So if you're wanting to move to Mexico, Spencer's the guy to go to. Yeah, I just wanted to make a video about, we can talk about the different, I guess just to let viewers know about that are interested in coming to Mexico and getting visas. So from my understanding, there are two types of visas. You probably know a little bit more, a lot more than I do about this sort of stuff. So what are the different types of visas that people look into getting, and how can you go about getting them?
Well, there are three basic types of visas. You've got your tourist card, FMM, which is good for 180 days for most people. You've got some countries, Europe, US and Canada, and other countries that can come into Mexico with their passport and get the 180 days. Some other countries like Russia, India, China, they need to go to the consulate to do kind of a pre-screening process to get a tourist card. So they would need to go to a consulate no matter what. Once people get in here to Mexico, generally you can change, they changed the law in 2012. So you cannot change your visa from tourist to another type of visa within Mexico, except if it's for family unity, which would mean having a spouse with a visa. So if you're married and your spouse, whether it's same sex or different sex, has a visa, is a Mexican citizen or is a temporary or permanent, then we can prove the relationship either with a marriage certificate, which is an apostille, of course, or birth certificate. And that actually goes down to grandchildren. So we have some elderly people who want to come to Mexico, their kids live here, and they have a Mexican child, and they can actually switch in the country from tourist to permanent resident without showing any income.
Okay, but so let's take my case for example. And I think what's the case for a lot of people is they're maybe thinking about retirement, or they don't really have any ties in Mexico, but they're thinking Mexico might be, for whatever reason, an attractive place to go to and live for a certain time period. You're saying that they wouldn't be able to come down and on the tourist visa then change over to a more permanent type of visa?
No, so people like that, some come down for an exploration trip where they'll come and see, all right, where do they want to live? Do they want to live in Chapala, Ajijic, Guadalajara, San Miguel, Puerto Vallarta, Zacatecas? People have different tastes, so they want to live in different places. So some will come down for an exploratory trip, then we'll work with them to qualify at a consulate outside of Mexico to get their initial visa, whether it's temporary or permanent. We recommend where it's possible to get the permanent visa because it's forever, but it also depends on what the person's finances are, how old they are, and what consulate they're going to qualify at. One common misconception is that people need to go to the consulate where they're from. So if you grew up in Los Angeles, you don't have to go to the consulate in Los Angeles. If you have family in North Carolina, for example, you can go to the consulate in North Carolina. You can go to a consulate in Texas. You can go to a consulate in Arizona.
Any consulate that'll work.
Any consulate.
And you were that's perfect. And you were mentioning just before we turned on the camera that different consulates have different requirements. So maybe it's kind of like in my case, the consulate in Portland worked fine. There was no issue, and I was able to get the visa. And maybe we can talk about this in just a second. I was actually originally applying for the permanent residency, which I would have gotten, but I then found out that I wanted to bring my car. So I found out that it would have been impossible, from what I understand, to bring my car with permanent residency. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later.
Sure.
But with the different consulates, as we were talking about, it's kind of like fitting they all have different requirements. And maybe you could talk a little bit on like what the general requirements are for people looking to get visas. Maybe some some people have some pensions they might be relying on, or
Well, you've got the temporary and the permanent visa. So for the temporary visa, they want to see that you're earning, per the law, about, with having a job outside of Mexico, earning about $1,600, $1,800 from that job. And they'll want 6 months bank statements to see those deposits. Now, let's say you don't show it, or it's not that easy, you've got just a crazy banking situation, then you can use an investment account, savings account, retirement account, and they'll apply a different standard. You need to show about $30,000
in savings.
In savings, and that would be with 12-month statements.
Okay.
Now,
does that work for stocks? Any type of
any kind of financial depository type of institution where you have regular account statements.
Yeah. Okay.
What
What about working with like people that want to work remotely? So maybe people not specifically looking to retire in Mexico, but maybe the digital nomads, or people that are having a job, especially now with COVID, that could maybe move to Mexico and work remotely. Is that a type of income situation that would be applicable to?
Oh yeah, because they just have to show they have a job and they have the 6 months bank statements to show that they're making the amount that's indicated. Now you mentioned, you went to one consulate. So we had a client come in the other day and he works remotely and makes good money. And right now with the coronavirus, many of the consulates aren't open. He said, his brother lives in Austin. You want to go to the Austin consulate. We looked at the requirements, and while per the law, using the standards and the exchange rate, they should accept $1,500, $1,600, $1,800 a month. Their requirement is $3,200 or $3,300 for temporary, which is more than permanent resident. But in this case, he may double that, so it's no big deal. So you have a kind of a standard for temporary, and then the consulates apply it differently. Some are going to require a larger amount of money, some are going to want just what the law says, and then for permanent resident, you've got different guidelines as well. Many consulates have tightened up over the past 3-4 years for permanent residents. A lot of them have a policy, if you're under 60, you won't get it.
Well, okay.
Or they want you to be a pensioner, and in their definition of pensioner is that you receive at least $1 of pension of Social Security. So for Social Security, you're over 60, but we have clients who are young who maybe worked, I know one that was a Navy chief, so he had 20 years in the Navy and he gets a military pension, and he's in his 40s. Other people from Europe, and they work 15 years, they have a pension. One guy's in his 30s. So it's not necessarily people with white or gray hair who are over 60 that get pensions. So every consulate's different, but some of them are flexible. If you want to come to Mexico, they'll do it with your pension from police, fire department, military. That's why you need to shop around or consult with someone as far as what consulate's good for you.
Yeah, exactly right. And all that information online can be it's just so differing, and that's why you're an invaluable resource to go to, because you have such a good feel on what's going on at all the consulates and just all the immigration law, and you're a perfect resource for that.
Everything changes, and every person's situation is different. So some people, for example, if there's a couple and they're 70 years old and they get pensions of $4,000 a month, then they qualify at any consulate for permanent resident. But if someone is younger and maybe self-employed and their income is sporadic, or maybe they have a large deposit this month, nothing the next month, then we've got to work a little extra hard to piece together a financial picture to prove the consulate they have a steady stream of income that will qualify and meet the amounts of the consulate is setting.
Yeah, I see. That's interesting. Okay, so it doesn't really apply in my case, but for people that are like looking to come as spouses, is it basically double the income requirements, or?
You've got different criteria. If you look at some of the immigration law and how they're applying it, if the spouse applies at the same time, or instead of spouse are economic dependent. So you can bring in your spouse, even same-sex. We've got lots of same-sex couples that we do this for, minor children, or even elderly parents. So people can bring all these people in under them. Now, if the consulate, let's say someone's income is tight per what the consulate wants, and they've got a wife and 2 kids, and maybe their income isn't quite enough for all those people, once they're inside Mexico, they don't apply the income requirement. So we would get the head of the family, their temporary visa, come into Mexico, and then using the apostille birth certificates, or if they're Canadian, there's no apostilles, they'd be legalized birth certificates, then we would bring in the minor children and spouse, the marriage certificate, under the primary applicant, and there's no income requirement. So sometimes we ask people, all right, try it at the consulate, and if it doesn't work, we'll fix it here in Mexico.
Okay. So let's say somebody says, oh, I'll just come down and do a tourist visa and then go to the U.S. every 6 months, and I'm really planning on living here, but I'll just hop the border every 6 months.
I don't recommend as far as a strategy. There are people that have been caught, or just for whatever reason attract the attention of the immigration officer because they see all these back-to-back tourist cards and entries. People think Mexico doesn't have good systems and controls, but they have a very elaborate system where they know every foreigner, all the entries and all the exits. So if they see that someone's really living in Mexico, there are people that they caught in Cancun. They caught one lady who was really working and she didn't have papers, she was a tourist, and they kicked her out. So imagine having your house, your life, your clothes, everything. Now you're in an airport with whatever is in your suitcase because maybe it was bad information, maybe you like living on the edge, maybe you didn't want to spend the money, and now you're in a bad situation.
So yeah, it's well worth doing the little bit of work to...
And there are other benefits too to having your papers in order. For example, you get a driver license here, you can open a bank account. There are many benefits to doing everything right, to being able to live a regular life and not have the restrictions or worry about, can you enter, what if your US license expires or Canadian license expires, opening a bank account to be able to pay the phone bill and other bills with auto pay versus having to stand in line or go to a machine.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned work. Are you able to work on a temporary or permanent residency visa? What if you want to open a business?
You can do both. So as far as work permission, for example, I'll start with the permanent visa. Permanent visa implies you have permission to work. You don't ask for permission, you just notify immigration. When you have your permanent visa, you show them that you're registered to pay taxes and saying, I'm going to be conducting this activity, doing this for work, being registered with the tax authorities, and then they approve the notification of that. For temporary, it's a little bit different. So some people come here, one of the most common is they're going to teach English. So what will happen is the school would then need to do a request to hire a foreign employee. Now to do that, the school needs to have the registration with immigration, which is a process. I did one recently, it took 3 weeks, but it can take sometimes 2 months, where they want the tax return to the school, they want their corporation formation papers if it's an entity, they want to see their filing the taxes, and they want a list of their employees to see that this isn't a company that's just only hiring foreigners, to try to encourage people to hire Mexican nationals wherever possible.
And that's something that the institution does itself?
So any employer to hire a foreigner needs to have their registration current with immigration. So, because as part of the process, let's say you're here and a school wants to hire you. So we would prepare the papers for the school to request work permit for a foreigner. Part of that process is turning in the receipt that they're registered with immigration, they have that approval, as well as the application saying, okay, here's our offer of employment to you, here are the days you're going to work, the hours, the salary, and the period of the contract. It's usually 1 or 2 years. And then once that gets approved, they will give us an approval, and then you would have to go to an interview at a consulate outside Mexico with the same requirements, except instead of presenting bank statements, you would present the official communication from immigration saying that you're approved for a work visa.
Okay.
So that's one part. We don't recommend that for a lot of people because they've changed their policies. So many years ago, you could come in on a work visa, being a salaried employee, and then say, I'm going to start my own business, and there was no problem. No. Now you have to stay. If you come in as a salaried employee, you have to do that. And if you stop your job, you have to notify immigration, and then you would have to get another job. So it's easier if someone has assets or income outside of Mexico to enter as a regular temporary visa holder. Then we get work permission, because then they're going to look at, well, what's the reason, or how did you enter in the beginning? So if it's for finances and you, for that reason, then the job thing is not big of a deal, because you can switch salaried, self-employed.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy to get permission to work on a temporary visa.
We haven't seen that many problems. Immigration wants to protect the Mexican workforce and jobs for Mexicans. So many times they'll want to see, why somebody qualified. So if somebody studied art in the U.S. and now they want to do something like engineering, immigration might say, well, show us your degree, show us a professional license, show us why we should authorize you to work in this industry. We had one school wanted to hire a journalism professor from Venezuela, and he didn't have his apostilled degree and documents like that. I said, well, you should get it. Well, no, just apply. And then they asked for it, and then time ran out, we had to resubmit it. So it's good to prepare, if someone is going to hire a foreigner, that they have some kind of document that proves that they're competent in that area.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Cool. So cool. Let's say, okay, I've decided I want to move to Mexico. I'm gonna contact Spencer. I'm gonna get all my documents in order. What would the process be? You're talking about consulates. I need to go to a consulate.
Well, the first thing is to see what are your plans. How old are you? Where are you from? Because where you're from is going to be a factor to a degree as far as what consulates are available. Your age, your source of income or assets in the U.S. will see what kind of visa you'll apply for. If you're a person who's like, oh, I love my car, I want to take my car to Mexico, you can have for up to 4 years on a temporary visa, but that means you're going to qualify for a temporary visa. If it's an older couple, or even a couple where there's a husband and wife, many times if they just bring one car, we'll put one spouse as temporary and the other is permanent, and the permanent can drive the temporary vehicle if they're married.
Okay, yeah, that just goes to mention that I think we've already touched on it, that with the temporary visa you can bring your car in, whereas with the permanent you're not able to
No, you
a
can't.
car. Okay, so let's say we want to bring our car. That was one of the reasons I went with the temporary visa. What are the different processes? For me, it was pretty easy. I don't even remember. I think your office just took care of everything I needed, pretty much. I mean, I needed to do a little legwork, but...
Well, as far as...
I had to stop off over on the other side of the border at like on Hercito office.
So at the border, they have certain places where you get your car permit, and you also check in immigration. One problem we see somewhat common is a lot of people will get a visa themselves and they come on into Mexico, and then they're talking to people and say, oh, I need to get a car permit, or oh, I never checked in. They thought that their consular visa sticker in their passport was good enough, but the consular visa gives you time limits, 180 days to enter Mexico. But at the border, you need to show them that visa, get the FMM, but instead of 180 days acting as a tourist visa, it'll be a Canje visa good for 30 days. And they're going to stamp the consular visa to show that you complied with the 180-day rule and then the 30-day rule to show when you cross the border. And then you would also use that document to get your car permit. Now with the car permit, you can get a car permit with the vehicle registration, if it's current, or the vehicle title, or even the loan agreement, the car loan agreement.
And let's say I just come in, that's something your office could do, is I come in willy-nilly, not aware that I needed a car temporary import permit. Your office could help in assisting to get that import permit?
Yes, they have a new system with the digital car permits. So we get them, I did a car permit a few days ago. Well, they authorized it the other day, and last night it came in. So if people came into Mexico without it, we can help them out and get them another 180-day car permit. So therefore, the car won't be subject to being impounded. What I want to get at with the documents to get the car permit, while you can enter Mexico with a vehicle registration, it's good to have the title, because if the vehicle is towed, stolen, or totaled, the insurance or the transitos, police, or impound yard want the title to prove you're the owner, and the registration doesn't prove that. So it can be a bit of an issue if you use one document to get the permit and enter Mexico, but if there's an issue, now you can't get the card of impound, and every day the tolls are adding up.
And is that valid for the entire 4 years that you're here, for the entire duration of your temporary import, of your temporary visa, or 180 days you mentioned?
So 180 days is what they'll give to tourists. You can get to do it properly and perfectly. So you come in with your consular visa, and you get a 30-day visa. The car permit's tied to that, only good for 30 days. Once immigration approves you for fingerprints, then we do a notification to aduana to extend that so you don't lose your deposit. Then after 1 year, most would renew for 3 more because it's cheaper and it's easier. Then there's another notification. If for some reason you forget to renew on time after the first year, it renders your car permit invalid because there was a break in the continuity of your immigration documents.
Okay.
While your car is legal, if you don't do the notification, they'll take your deposit, which is $200, $300, or $400. So it's better to do the notifications to show you're complying. You'll also be in the computer system, so if the police check, they can check by VIN number or the permit number and see that everything's good.
Yeah, and right, in my case, if I miss anything, I know I can call you and you can help me out, and you have helped me out. So cool. Well, what else? I think that's kind of we talked about visas and the temporary import permit. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention? I've always wanted to ask you. I know you've been in Mexico forever. How did you come down, or have you always been here in Guadalajara?
Well, I was teased. I came down on a big airplane, but I came down to a friend moved to Mexico, and I've been going to Cancun to scuba dive and go to the beach, and then I came to the area here and thought, wow, there's opportunity because the weather's mild, your dollar stretches farther, and I was bilingual. So then I saw the crisis coming in the U.S. with banking and merchant banking, and then said, well, I'm going to buy a property here. Found a great property and bought it, and everyone made fun of me. Why are you buying in Mexico? That's dumb. Look, I've got 5 houses in the U.S. Well, now they've got no houses and bad credit, and I've got my home and pay under $100 a year in property taxes, and not struggling with a mortgage payment of thousands of dollars to have a free and clear home in 30 years, and then take my Social Security check and give it to the tax collector. Because in California, where I came from, property tax is $1,000 a month.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for doing this. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Let's see. Just that, before people go to the consulate, we like to talk to them and see what they have and look at, when they can go to the consulate, what their options are, geographically, to kind of match the person with their goals with the consulate. Like I said, if someone's in their 70s and they've got money in the bank and pension, that's a no-brainer, but it's other situations can be a little more complex, or, coordinating, bringing in the family members. Another issue with documents is many consulates, if you do bring in your children, your spouse with you to the consular appointment, they'll often accept within the U.S. Or the same as Canada, the birth or marriage certificates without the apostille or legalization. But then later in Mexico, if they ask for the document for renewal or for change from temporary to permanent, then they want to see the apostille in that document. So people are often taken by surprise with that. So it's good while people are in the US or while they're in Canada to get that. In Canada, the legalization is like an apostille, but they only issue it at the Mexican consulate in the province that issued the document. So we encourage people to get fresh copies that are issued in 2020. When they go to the consulate interview, pay the $40 or $50 Canadian to get that legalization, because it's much cheaper to get when you're there than have to sign authorizations and FedEx documents back and forth. With immigration here in Mexico, every office applies things differently. So
Within Mexico?
Within every state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So while every person's different, I said step changes where you had a clone and you came in now and you went to a different consulate, different city, things might vary a little bit depending on the situation. For example, right now for the COVID coronavirus, they're reissuing tourist cards in many states. Here in Jalisco they're doing it, but they've got their quirks. They're not charging, but right now their appointments are all booked up until September, so we can't do anything for anybody. In other states, they're making it easier. You can go right in, but they're charging fines and fees of thousands of pesos. So it's kind of a weird thing. And then they all have their policies. For example, I know a lady in San Miguel, and she does a lot of visas, and sometimes people come here so we can do the visa. Other times they might want to go there. We had one lady come to actually live in Chapala, use my services. She was in Oaxaca, because their policy was, we're not going to give anyone, we're not going to foreign work permission on a temporary visa. Came here, got the work permission, did the 3-year renewal, then she went back to Oaxaca because she already had the permission. I had to honor her. Other places say, you know, to change from temporary to permanent within Mexico, you have to, Jalisco applied this a few years back, you have to be a pensioner and show $1 in pension Social Security. So there are people that might have $2 million in the bank and be 70 years old, but they're going to be forced to run out the 4 years of the temporary.
Wow.
So in San Miguel, I think she was telling me that they will only take pension income for that. Whereas here, maybe someone gets a small Social Security monthly amount, we could show a token $1, and then we use their assets to qualify them. So it's really all over the board, and it's ever changing. Every couple months they come up with something new. About 2 or 3 years ago, if someone had a Mexican child, you could change within Mexico and be a permanent resident. Then they started applying the policy here in Jalisco, well, we want the child to have Mexican ID. Even if the child has a US passport, that wasn't good enough. They want Mexican ID. So every office applies it different. Some offices want to see bank statements, even though law doesn't require it for renewal, an on-time renewal. I should also make mention, be careful of the dates, because they use the system where it's day, month, year. So someone came in and they said, yeah, I want to get my papers renewed because my papers expire on, you know, August 1st. I said, buddy, your papers expired on January 8th because the 1/8 and the 8/1. And the immigration law came out in 2012, and they put really high amounts. Nobody was rich enough to retire in Mexico. They changed it 2 years later, but they forgot to fix the part for regularizations or qualifying for temporary within Mexico. So it's the same to qualify for temporary in Mexico, which you would have to do if your document expires. If it expires, you have 60 days to do a regularization, and they're going to hold you to the same standard as applying for a permanent outside of Mexico, which means a lot of people don't qualify. So it's important to read the dates in your documents. Use common sense. You know, if you came in, you know, that person, you know, August or January, well, you kind of know when you enter about a year later, you're going to have to renew, and check the dates so you don't renew late.
Well, yeah, a lot of it's over my head. But, you know, that's, I think, if you're in Guadalajara or Chapala, and I imagine those are your main areas, your bread and butter is Chapala and Guadalajara?
Yes, we have people actually all over Mexico. A lot of people, there's just nobody locally. We have people in San Luis Potosí, Mexico City, quite a few clients in Oaxaca, curiously, and other places, Mazatlan, where we'll do phone consultations, review their documents, set everything up, prepare the documents, to email them, to print, and then give them a checklist to walk in there and just follow the instructions so they can get their visa and process it without us having to physically be there, or without having to come to Guadalajara.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you've been an invaluable resource. Really appreciate you doing the interview and for helping me out so much here in Guadalajara. Really appreciate it. And if you're in here, you really need to contact us, Spencer. You cannot go without having Spencer's card in your pocket. I have several, so very valuable resource. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Alright guys, so thanks for watching the video. Remember to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to receive notifications when new videos come out, And thanks for all my patrons on patreon.com. See you guys very soon. Adios.